You just have to put up with it if you're feeling sick.
My husband demanded intimacy at night while I was suffering from morning sickness. Seeing me refuse because of nausea, he looked thoroughly annoyed and tried to force his way. When I asked him to at least use protection, he sighed with frustration and said,
If you're pregnant, we don't need protection, right? As a wife, you should fulfill your duties instead of making excuses.
My name is Mia, a 27-year-old office worker at a foreign trading company. I married Richard, a colleague from the same company, a year ago. He's a year older at 28, with a handsome, refreshing look, making him very popular among the female staff. Moreover, as the ace of the sales department, he brings in results every month and has the trust of his superiors. Despite his capabilities, he never brags about his work and remains humble, always ready to help his juniors with their work, making his personality seem perfect. I was one of those who admired such a perfect husband. Surprisingly, he was the one who initiated our relationship. When I had finally completed a project after many overtime hours, he approached me out of the blue, invited me for a meal as a gesture of appreciation. I was surprised, but pleased to be approached by the senior I admired, and accepted the invitation to go to his favorite restaurant. As expected of the ace of the sales department, he had interesting stories to share and was a good listener, making our time together enjoyable and meaningful. After that, we started going out for meals regularly, and before I knew it, our relationship had begun with someone I thought was out of my reach. The progression from there was swift, with us going out together in various places, and him supporting me both at work and personally, becoming my rock. On our first anniversary, at the same restaurant where we first dined,
Mia, I can't imagine life without you. I want to make you happy forever. Will you marry me?
He proposed with a bouquet of 100 roses. I'm so happy. Yes, I will marry you. Of course, my answer was a joyful yes. We announced our marriage at work, and our colleagues were happy for us, saying we made a perfect couple. Soon after, we had a lavish wedding ceremony. Our parents were moved to tears seeing me in my wedding dress, overjoyed for us. I couldn't believe this manga-like situation I was in, marrying the man I've always loved, and felt so happy it almost seemed like a dream. One day, feeling unwell with waves of nausea from the morning, I decided to leave work early as it wouldn't stop. Suspecting the cause, I used a pregnancy test, and it showed a positive result. Both my husband and I had been longing for a child, so I immediately sent him a message to share the news. He replied right away, sharing his joy. Later, I heard from a colleague that upon receiving my message, my husband was so overjoyed that he jumped around and cried at work. With this pregnancy, I decided to resign from my job. I loved my work and felt a sense of fulfillment, planning to work until the last possible moment before taking maternity leave. However, my husband didn't agree.
Mia, I'm worried about you and our baby. I earn enough, so isn't it better if you quit your job? Put the baby and yourself first.
He advised me to quit. Initially, I was resistant to becoming a housewife. But, given it was my first pregnancy, I was somewhat anxious, and above all, I was touched by my husband's concern and care for me and our child. So I accepted his suggestion and resigned. When I announced my resignation at work, my colleagues were very disappointed. But I was determined to do my best for my future with my husband's words in my heart. At that time, I thought I had an ideal husband who asked me to prioritize our child and myself over work, considering his earnings sufficient. But as soon as I quit my job, his selfish and egocentric true nature began to reveal itself. That day, I was struggling with severe morning sickness from the morning, making it hard even to prepare meals, so I bought some frozen food from the supermarket. When my husband came home, I served the reheated frozen food for dinner, to which he clearly showed his displeasure with a click of his tongue.
You can't be serious that this is all we're having for dinner today?
I'm sorry, I've been feeling too sick to cook since this morning, so I bought some frozen food from the supermarket. At that moment, my husband slammed his fist on the table and threw the fork he was holding at me. Caught off guard and stunned, I didn't realize what had happened.
Your job is to be a housewife. Can't you even do something as simple as cooking? You're really useless.
When he yelled at me, with an anger I had never heard before. I'm sorry. Please don't be so angry. Shaken by the sight of my husband I had never seen, I hurriedly picked up the fork and apologized, holding back tears. However, he was so upset that he locked himself in his room. This incident started a pattern where my husband would lose his temper and throw tantrums whenever he was dissatisfied with any household task I did or didn't do. Today, he got angry again because I hadn't finished folding the laundry before he came home, kicking furniture around in a rage. As usual, I apologized while crying, and then he said something shocking.
You're such a useless woman. Listen, I only married you because I like your face. It's a face I can overlook other faults for.
He boldly stated he married me just because he liked my face.
There might come a man who earns more than me and goes after you just for your looks. Being a housewife means you don't have to worry about that. And without your own income, you can't easily divorce me, right? Especially when we have a child. Think you can raise a child without a job? Hand over custody to me. Pay child support? Impossible.
I was speechless at his audacity in stating the reasons he made me quit my job. I lost all confidence in building a future with a husband who could say such things. Naturally, the thought of divorce came to mind. However, frustrating as it was, thinking of our unborn child, I didn't have the courage to demand a divorce at that moment. Since I wasn't at fault, I wanted to retaliate before divorcing him. With that in mind, despite feeling nauseous from the morning sickness, I started planning my escape from him. Then, on a particularly bad day of morning sickness, when I could do nothing but vomit or lie down, I was lying on the living room sofa. I must have fallen asleep because, before long, my husband came home from work. I hurriedly got up. Welcome home. I fell asleep. I'll start making dinner right away.
It's okay today. I already ate with a client.
Okay, that's good. Relieved that he wasn't going to be in a bad mood, I lay down again since I was still feeling unwell. After changing out of his suit, my husband approached me lying on the sofa, kissed me, and demanded intimacy. I'm sorry, but I'm feeling too sick today to be in the mood. Can we please wait until another time? I gently refused, citing my morning sickness.
When I'm making a move, you're not supposed to refuse.
But he immediately turned red with anger and yelled. Knowing arguing would worsen his mood and affect me later, I reluctantly gave in, despite feeling sick. But he attempted to proceed without contraception. When I insisted, please, you have to use protection. He frowned and headed to the bathroom. After kicking things around and making a scene, he returned to the living room quickly.
We're out of stock. If we don't have any, can't help it, right?
As he aggressively reached for my clothes, I desperately resisted, citing the baby's safety. He threw his bag at my face, clearly annoyed.
A wife should at least keep stock of condoms. If you insist on using them, go buy them yourself.
Seeing an opportunity, I left for the car, sweating coldly. An hour later, the sound of the front door announced my furious return.
How long does it take to buy condoms? You're ridiculously late, you idiot.
He yelled in his usual loud voice. But the moment he shouted, his face froze in surprise, turning pale. There stood I and my dad. My dad is a large, tall man, a former wrestler, with a fierce look that could intimidate anyone thinking he's unapproachable, which is why my husband was uneasy around him. The reason my dad was there is that I drove straight to my parents' house seeking help. My parents were surprised but warmly welcomed me back. Feeling their warmth, tears of relief started to flow. Realizing something serious had to happen, they asked me what was going on, and I told them everything. After I finished telling them, my parents were upset, asking why I hadn't told them sooner. Especially Dad, who was shaking with rage at the extent of his anger. With that momentum, he went to my house with me, intending to give my husband a piece of his mind. Dad confronted my husband, saying,
"I've heard the story, Richard. It seems you've treated Mia quite poorly. I can't entrust my precious daughter and grandchild to someone like you. Divorce her immediately."
His voice was as loud as my husband's.
"What do you mean? Coming to my house all of a sudden and demanding a divorce? You've only heard Mia's side, right? Do you have any proof? Don't just blindly believe whatever lies she's telling. You just insulted my daughter as a stupid woman. How can you call it a lie when you made her go out to buy condoms alone while she's suffering from severe morning sickness?"
Just as my husband and Dad were about to physically confront each other, I took out my mobile phone from my pocket. If you want other evidence, it's right here. There are videos of you yelling in anger, lashing out at furniture, and pushing me. In fact, as part of gathering evidence of my husband's culpability, I had set up pet cameras around the house. Those cameras captured his actions in detail, serving as evidence. The videos of my husband raging were clearly displayed on my mobile phone. Seeing the videos, my husband turned pale and tried to snatch the phone from me. But Dad quickly stepped between us, glaring at my husband to back off. "I no longer want to be treated and controlled like a housekeeper by Richard. You can choose to either have this video submitted to your company or divorce me and pay compensation." I exploded with all the emotions I had been holding back, demanding a divorce. Reluctantly, my husband agreed, fearing the loss of his reputation and job at the company. After involving lawyers and discussions, he signed the divorce papers, agreeing to compensation and child support. Then, with Dad's help, I packed up and left the house, finally freed from my husband's control. 3 months after the divorce, my morning sickness had eased. But as I was entering the midterm of my pregnancy, working was hardly an option. Without an income, paying rent was difficult, so I moved back with my parents. They warmly welcomed me and eagerly supported me, looking forward to the arrival of their grandchild. I decided not to submit the evidence to his company, completely cutting off all contact with my husband, except for ensuring the child support payments were secured. At a company drinking party, my husband, perhaps due to alcohol, ended up admitting all he had done to me, expecting sympathy, but instead isolating himself as his colleagues withdrew from him. This revelation, coupled with the fact of our divorce, shifted his colleagues' perception of him, affecting his professional standing and chances for promotion.
"I'm not in the wrong, am I?"
It seems he ended up confessing everything he had done to me. My husband thought his actions were justified and expected everyone to sympathize and agree with him. But contrary to his expectations, his colleagues were taken aback and isolated him. This, combined with the fact we were actually divorced, lent credibility to the story, and his previously built reputation in the company was tarnished, as his character came into question. There had been talks of a promotion, and he was expected to excel by his superiors, but that was postponed. Despite trying to pass it off as a drunken joke later, he was not believed, and his workplace environment became uncomfortable, leading to his resignation within a year. The savings and severance pay he'd accumulated from his sales job were wiped out by the compensation, and now, while job hunting, he is desperately trying to make ends meet by working part-time jobs during the day and at night. It seems he is exhausted and struggling to find steady employment. As for me, I'm living with my angelic child born safely at my parents' home, struggling with the unfamiliar challenges of motherhood and the fragmented sleep I was nonetheless happy to have returned to my former job. A colleague who had heard about me from my husband contacted me, talked about my current situation, and helped me get my job back. Thanks to this, I managed to return to the workplace I loved. When I thanked my colleague, they said, "As a single mother, you have to raise your child, so let us at least support you in this way." These words were incredibly reassuring. I felt very blessed and was full of gratitude towards my colleagues. My parents also helped take care of the child, assisting me in balancing work and parenting. I vowed never to let anyone dominate me again, to freely pursue both my career and parenting with all my heart, and I've promised to live a happy and fun life with my beloved child. "Look, Dad bought me this car." My jubilant sister Madison showed me a photo of a family car that could fit our large family at once. Even if Dad is indulgent towards his grandchildren, it seemed unlikely he could easily afford such a car. Sensing what I was thinking, my sister mentioned it was bought with Dad's retirement fund. Wishing she would just go home if she wanted to boast, she smiled sweetly and said, "Dad's out of money now. He's your responsibility. Take good care of him, will you?" I'm Sophia, a 36-year-old housewife this year, struggling with raising 2 growing children and working part-time. My husband is a gentle man, and we've had a smooth sailing life without major conflicts. I have an older sister, 3 years my senior. Until she married a wealthy man in her 30s, my sister was a career woman. She quit her job reluctantly when she found out she was pregnant with her first child, and had been a housewife ever since, or so I heard a few years ago. My sister and I haven't been very close since childhood. Unlike her bold personality, I was always the quiet and inconspicuous type. On the other hand, my sister was quite assertive, often getting into verbal fights with classmates, and maintained that temperament at home. Our parents always prioritized her, and she took advantage of that. I felt lonely at first, but by the time I was in high school, I had gotten over it. However, our parents divorced around that time, and we were taken in by our economically stable dad. Dad, in his awkward way, took care of the house and us. Since my sister went off to college and rarely came home, it was essentially just Dad and me living together. We had a simple but enjoyable life, sharing many conversations. I moved away for junior college, then met my husband at work and got married. So I never returned to live in the family home where Dad was alone. Years later, I was informed that Dad and my sister's family began living together. After Dad suffered a stroke at work and was rushed to the hospital, fortunately he was treated quickly and had almost no after effects. But living alone was deemed too risky, so my sister proposed they live together. At the time, I was supported by her unexpected gesture, but thinking about their living arrangements, my sister's apartment seemed more comfortable for Dad than our family home, so I decided to rely on them. However, knowing I couldn't just leave everything to them, I started transferring $300 monthly to my sister's account. About 5 years later, Dad suddenly contacted me. It was a regular weekday morning, after I'd sent the kids off to school.
"Sophia, sorry for not getting in touch for a while."
That's how Dad started, his voice heavy.
"Anything unusual recently? Did Madison say anything to you?"
Madison is my sister. When I asked why he would ask that, he began,
"It's a bit shameful to say, but..."
Dad slowly started to tell the story. My sister had 2 children, just like us. Since living together, the kids grew fond of Dad, and he was quite fond of them too. In addition to providing for my sister's family, Dad had been paying for everything from the kids' educational materials and toys to meals out. It was fine when the grandchildren asked directly, but recently, my sister and her husband started using the kids' names to get Dad to buy expensive electronics and even cars. When Dad hesitated due to the frequency of these requests, they suddenly turned cold, ignoring him until he agreed to buy. Then, upon his retirement at 65, my sister showed him a catalog saying, "The kids want Grandpa to join our family trip. We're thinking of driving around, but our current car only fits 4. We were thinking it'd be nice to get this new car, don't you think? Eventually, Dad ended up signing a contract for the family car my sister pointed out. Between that and the vacation expenses, Dad's retirement savings were rapidly depleting, and my sister treated him as if he was useless without money. Now feeling out of place at home, his only solace was his grandchildren Dad shared. Learning of Dad's mistreatment left me speechless. My sister always had a tendency to dismiss people who were no longer of use to her financially. She had demanded cash gifts for her firstborn's birth and other celebrations, expecting me to reciprocate, but never did the same for my children. Wanting to avoid becoming someone who demands money so blatantly, I chose to distance myself from her instead. Throughout this time, I received one-sided updates from her. I didn't want to become a naughty person like my sister, who didn't hesitate to ask for money. So instead of saying anything to her, I decided to distance myself from her. During that time, I continued to receive unsolicited communications from my sister, including photos of her children smiling, dressed in cute clothes, using beautiful appliances, and enjoying vacations, all seemingly funded by Dad. All those things seemed to have been bought with Dad's money. Back then, I mistakenly thought Dad favored my sister's family over mine, feeling somewhat disappointed. However, after hearing Dad's story, it seems that wasn't necessarily the case. My sister had been using her children to continuously extract money from Dad. Dad himself, watching his account balance decrease day by day, convinced himself it was for his grandchildren's sake, but the endless demands from my sister and her husband left him physically and mentally exhausted. This was exacerbated by the incident with the family car on Dad's retirement day. Prompted by this, Dad considered leaving my sister's house, but then she approached him again, saying, "Dad, about the car you bought us? The payments seem tough with the loan. The kids have education plans, and it's going to be expensive. I don't want to keep burdening you forever, so if you could just take care of the car payment, we won't need living expenses from you anymore. It's not a bad deal, right?" Dad suspected there was more to it, but thought this could be a way out, and used all his retirement money to pay off the car. As expected, my sister's attitude, "Dad, it's become hard to live with you here, so please leave today," changed afterward.
Madison mentioned I might bring her over tomorrow, so I called wondering if you knew anything.
Of course, I had heard nothing. After hanging up with Dad, expecting a call from my sister, none came that day. However, the next morning, there was an early visit from my sister and Dad. Seeing my face, my sister smirked. "Looks like you've already heard. Then this will be quick," I replied. "I've heard everything from Dad. Does scamming him for money make you happy? Didn't I send Dad his living expenses?" Dad looked surprised, hearing this for the first time. "Don't act so high and mighty over just $300. That's not enough to support an unemployed old man for a month. If you're going to talk like that, you should at least pay $2,000 for caregiving." Despite Dad listening, my sister said whatever she pleased. "Sorry, but my husband feels the same. We're already overwhelmed with 2 kids." "But you've received so much money from Dad, haven't you? Toys for the kids, appliances, vacations?" "We're living together, so that's only natural." "Oh, are you jealous because you didn't receive anything?" "Don't worry. Now you get to take care of Dad." Frustrated with my sister's unwillingness to listen, I was about to retort when Dad interjected.
"Enough, Sophia. I'm sorry, but could I stay here until I find another place? It will be a lot of trouble, so I'll pay $8,000 a month for living expenses."
My sister, "What?" and I both exclaimed. After a moment of silence, my sister burst into laughter. "What's that? Make your lies a bit more believable. Sorry, but I don't have time for liars. This will be our last goodbye. I'll delete all your contacts. Don't bother asking for help." Hilarious. "Well, Sophia, it's all yours." After she left, Dad remained serious. It was implausible for Dad, now unemployed, to come up with $8,000 monthly. Honestly, my house was slightly cramped for a family of 4. Even though we were frugal, we didn't have enough savings to comfortably add another person. But I couldn't let Dad go back to my sisters. So, in the evening, when the whole family was together, we discussed and officially decided to live with Dad until he found a new place. Watching Dad, I felt an inexplicable sense of security, which would soon be explained. After a few months of Dad living with us, he and we adjusted to the new dynamics, fitting in as if he had always been a part of the family. I thought we should have called him sooner, but felt this worked out for the best. One day, we had an unexpected visitor at our house. It was my sister. Since it was a weekday, only Dad and I were at home. I considered pretending we weren't home, but Dad suggested we at least hear her out, so I faced my sister. "Sophia, good to see you. Dad, it's been a while." My sister looked away awkwardly upon seeing Dad's face. "What do you want?" "I heard we weren't supposed to be in contact anymore," I said coldly, to which my sister glared briefly before hastily changing her expression. "That's why I came here. Can we talk inside? It's important, and I don't want to be seen talking out here." Reluctantly, I let her in. Once we were inside at the dining table, "I'm in need of some money. Could you lend me some?" she immediately said. Dad and I exchanged surprised looks. "Doesn't your husband earn well? So just a little bit would help, right?" I was baffled by her request. As you can see, we live modestly. We don't have money to lend. "But you're living comfortably, even with Dad here. Does that mean you have savings? You've always been good at saving." It seems she hadn't believed that story at all. I shook my head. "Madison, didn't you hear? We actually do get $8,000 a month from Dad for living expenses." "Huh?" My sister looked puzzled, then laughed mockingly. "Oh, that story. Still going with that? I've seen all of Dad's pay stubs while he lived with us, and there was never such an amount. Maybe during bonus months, but he's retired, right?" "Yes, even without bonuses, Dad almost always has that kind of income." Dad nodded in agreement, but my sister still refused to believe. "So you're saying you have enough to spare? My kids are going on their first field trip, so I need money for a backpack, lunch money?" I sighed and replied, "Did you ever do anything for my kids? You ignored my pregnancy announcement. You only contact me when it suits you, and it's always about money. If your husband earns well, that should be enough. Why do you always need more money?" My sister fell silent, pondering, then suddenly stood up. "Fine. I can't expect anything from poor people. This really is the last time I'll have to see your annoying faces. Goodbye." She left hurriedly after her defiant parting words. "Even though you came to visit me, what's with that attitude?" Dad and I just shrugged at each other.
"If Madison had apologized sincerely, I might have told her the truth."
"With her attitude, she'd just try to take more if she knew about your real estate income. You do this, you don't need to work because of it."
"Maybe so. I've had enough of them while we lived together. No need to tell them anything now."
Dad looked somewhat sad. It pained me to see Dad upset because of my sister. But knowing she can't get money from us anymore, I doubted we'd see her again. Yet, just 3 months later, she contacted us again. Surprisingly, from a payphone. "Hey, where have you been?" she ranted urgently. "Thought you said you wouldn't contact us again." "That aside, I don't have much time. I want to meet, so give me your address." Apparently, she had visited our old home without notice. We had moved and weren't there. After pressuring the neighbors, she learned that we had moved to a larger apartment and called to confirm. "So, you are saving money after all. You lied to me." I kindly reiterated. "We moved with Dad's help. The rent is more than double, but Dad suggested we get more rooms as the kids are growing." "That's impossible with just Dad's income. I told you."
"Sure, if we're talking about earned income alone."
"Huh?"
I handed the receiver to Dad at that point.
Dad spoke to my sister.
Hello, Madison. Actually, I have some income from real estate besides my salary. It was quite unstable back in the day, so I kept working at the company just to be safe. You know, even if you own an apartment, the income changes depending on the occupancy, right? By the time I retired, fortunately, I had managed to secure a comfortable margin, so I thought of keeping it as an asset.
What? You kept such important information to yourself during tough times? Overriding Dad's voice, my sister shouted in a piercing, loud voice. I could faintly hear the sound of a few coins being inserted from the other end. Dad, I'm sorry for being such a foolish daughter. I have one last request. Actually, my husband was into stocks, and they crashed badly. He even dipped into the company's money and got fired, leading to a huge debt. Now we're all struggling to make ends meet. The kids have even lost weight. Could you help us out for a while? I've always wanted to be with you since then, but various circumstances made it hard for me too.
I'm sorry, but I won't be returning there. I'll talk to our relatives, so it's best if they take care of the grandchildren. I have no intention of doing anything for you guys anymore.
Dad firmly cut off my pleading sister.
Consider the car I bought for you previously as your severance pay. If you try to contact us in any way, I might even consult the police, depending on the situation.
Though I couldn't hear her, I could imagine my sister trembling in despair. After Dad hung up, we changed our contact information and went into a state of estrangement with them. Months passed, and every year-end and New Year's, we spent at the main family home of Dad's side. This time, Aunt Isabella, Dad's sister, brought along my sister's children. The two children, meeting us after a long time, were expressive and adorable, clearly being well taken care of by my sister. She seems to exchange letters with my sister occasionally and told us about her recent situation. Since then, my sister tried to find where we were, but couldn't find any clues. She must have really wanted to get Dad back. It was a good thing we only told a few people about our new address. Moreover, my sister's husband, believing Dad had income from real estate, ventured into real estate investment without proper study and failed quickly. This made their living situation even harder, and they eventually sold the car Dad bought for them. Plans for a family vacation we had been planning for a while were also scrapped due to these issues, and the relationship between the couple and their children worsened, almost breaking down. At least the children can live comfortably since they have Aunt Isabella. Aunt Isabella, who loves children but was not blessed with her own, said, "I'm happy to have found new joy at this age." The same goes for Dad, who now takes great care of my children. Initially, it was supposed to be until Dad found his next home, but his income had been a great help, and the kids have grown to love their grandfather dearly. Thanks to Dad, we were able to move into a larger house, so we've decided to continue living together, with the promise of taking care of him in the future. Recently, seeing Dad helping the kids with their school homework made me feel happy and my cheeks loosen up. I'm relieved that Dad has found a new purpose in life